Thank the chair. Mr. Kirshner, and by the way, I apologize, at least on behalf of this side of the committee, for a disparagement characterizing your testimony. I don't think we should ever do that in a committee. We don't have to agree.
Thank you, Representative Connolly. I'm from New Jersey, so I've suffered worse.
I'm from Boston originally. We don't like that. Mr. Kirshner, Mr. Levitt's client, Garrett O'Brien, posted the names and personally identifying information, including parts of home addresses, for 4 current or former FBI officials. In August, Kyle Seraphim, who has hosted multiple podcasts with Mr. O'Boyle, tweeted, and I quote, "The people who left Garrett O'Boyle's family and my family homeless should experience what guys like us are prepared to do to evil," unquote. Mr. Kirshner, you served in the FBI. What's wrong with identifying FBI officials' partial addresses, home towns, personal information, and making a threat? You may justify it because you think they're engaged in evil, but that's a direct threat from the way I read it. What could go wrong with that kind of thing? And isn't that the kind of threat of violence that I think, ought to be examined by a weaponization committee as opposed to what we're doing here today? Your view.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I wasn't with the FBI, though. I was with the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, right up the street there. But I'll tell you, I worked closely with the FBI, the Washington Field Office, directly across the street from my former office. And, we moved heaven and earth to prevent personal information from getting out about our witnesses, about people we were investigating, so as they, to prevent them from being unfairly, perhaps, smeared with an investigation that didn't result in an indictment. And, I had my fair share of witnesses killed in Washington, D.C., because their information got out. They were labeled as snitches. And then I had to sit with the families of a witness and talk about, how very sorry I was for what happened to them because that information
So while we're bemoaning the alleged mistreatment of certain individuals, including some here today, which may not be true, we're escalating it with actual threats that could lead to violence, even death. Is that correct?
You endanger the lives of folks when you put that kind of information out into the public square.
Certain irony when we're worried about weaponization, while meanwhile some of the people we purport to be advocating for are engaged in this kind of activity threatening FBI agents. Mr. Horowitz, there have been allegations made that the FBI has weaponized security clearance revocations to target and root out conservatives at the Bureau. Have you found any such evidence of a broad pattern of trying to target conservatives and revoking their security clearances?
We have not made such a finding.
Have you made any findings that the FBI security clearance process targets Christians?
We have not made such a finding.
Have you made any findings that the FBI leadership is targeting military veterans?
We've not made such a finding.
Have you made any findings that Jeffrey Veltri, now the special agent in charge of FBI's Miami field office, was biased against conservatives?
We haven't made any findings with regard to Mr. Veltri.
And have you made any findings that the FBI wrongly revoked the clearance of former special agent Garrett O'Boyle?
I'm not going to speak to any particular case because we have matters ongoing, and so as I'm answering those questions, I'm talking about what we've done as of today.
We'll stipulate that, but would it be fair to summarize your answers to the previous questions? You haven't found any pattern of ideological or religious bias by the FBI with respect to those issues. Is that correct?
That is correct. What we found, as I mentioned earlier, in our past work is, frankly, issues on occasion with FBI and, frankly, other law enforcement agencies and other parts of the department acting inappropriately with regard to whistleblowers.
That's different than a pattern.
That's different than a pattern.
That's different than a pattern. Finally, Mr. Kirshner, as a child of the 60s, I find it almost humorous to hear characterizations of the FBI as this hotbed of liberal, if not leftist, ideology. I'm going to give you the last word on that. It seems to me the FBI has always been a fairly conservative culture, and certainly a right-of-center political bent if there was one. What's your view?
Yes, sir. And I had a lot of knockdown, drag-out discussions with lots of FBI agents over the course of the course of an investigation, whether we should indict, who we should indict, what we should indict. But I never believed any of it was born of politics or their ideological beliefs or preferences. It never was, in my experience. That's why I find this topic a little curious.
The gentleman's time has expired.